My name is Logan Brooks, and on that fateful night when my sister Jade stepped foot into that luxurious mansion in La Jolla, not a single person in the Caldwell family had any idea that the entire empire they proudly called their family legacy was about to be crushed into dust. For 8 long years, Jade had kept hidden a terrifying secret, one powerful enough to rip apart everything they held dear. She was the anonymous owner of 58% of Caldwell Enterprises, the giant in defense technology and marine biology that her husband's family bragged about as if they had built it with their own hands. At its current valuation worth billions of dollars, those shares gave Jade absolute power. Just one single vote was enough to strip them of all control, turning them from owners into beggars in the very company that bore their name. But Jade chose silence. She played the role of the gentle wife from North Park, freelancing as a graphic designer and driving an old faded Toyota. To the Caldwell family, she was just the poor girl who married above her station, a stain they reluctantly tolerated but never respected. They mocked her simple clothes, ridiculed her modest apartment, and despised the way she rejected their flashy, money-drenched lifestyle. What they never suspected was this every billion-dollar contract, every miraculous recovery from the brink of bankruptcy over the past 8 years. All of it happened because of the money Jade quietly injected from the shadows. She saved their empire time and time again, while they treated her like an embarrassing outsider, a burden that needed to be eliminated soon. Then that deadly invitation arrived. One Thursday evening, the message appeared. Her in-laws wanted Jade and her husband to come for a private dinner on Friday. Just the four of them. They called it an important conversation about family and the future. Jade understood better than anyone the true meaning in their ruthless upper-class world. They had finally decided to make their move. They wanted to test which side their son would choose when forced between blood ties and his inferior wife. They wanted to buy her off, silence her, and banish her from their lives forever. Jade walked into that dining room that night with a heart as cold as ice. They flashed their perfectly fake smiles, poured expensive red wine, and waited for the ideal moment to deliver their fatal blow. They believed they held every card. They thought they could easily dispose of this problem, like they had so many times before. Little did they know the woman they had despised for years, the one they saw as a parasite, was actually the true owner of the entire empire. And tonight, she was ready to flip the entire board, causing their whole world to collapse in agony and humiliation. If you've ever been looked down on by people who think they're superior, laughed at by them, had your self-respect trampled, then smash that like button right now, so I know you're here with me. Drop a comment telling me about the moment someone underestimated you and had to bitterly swallow every single word they said. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications immediately, because the next part of this story will give you chills. I promise you, you will not want to miss the moment the Caldwell family drops to their knees begging for mercy when they discover that the person they humiliated was their savior, and also the one holding the knife that decides their fate. The story has only just begun. The best part is coming. Are you ready? See you in the next video. 8 years ago, when Jade didn't even know who the Caldwell family was, she quietly placed her first chess piece. A small, silent move, but one powerful enough to one day decide the fate of an entire empire. The turning point didn't come from ambition, but from something utterly ordinary, a modest inheritance left by our grandmother after she passed away. Not a vast fortune, just a few $100,000, the fruit of a lifetime of frugal saving. For most people, that money would have been a life changer, a down payment on a house, a luxury trip, or at least the comforting feeling of security. But Jade was different. She never saw money as the destination. To her, money was merely a tool, and it had to be used the right way. For months on end, Jade practically vanished from social life. Night after night, she buried herself in financial reports, SEC filings, stock charts, and industry news. She hunted for dying companies, those diamonds buried in the rough due to mismanagement, temporary scandals, or plain bad luck. Jade believed that if you looked deep enough, true value would reveal itself. And then that name kept appearing over and over, like Destiny Caldwell Enterprises. At that time, Caldwell was plummeting uncontrollably. A multi-billion-dollar defense contract had collapsed in scandal, design flaws, delays, exploding costs. The Pentagon pulled out without mercy. Lawsuits piled up, relentlessly draining their reserves dry. Investors fled en masse, sending the stock price into free fall. The press called it the death knell of the Caldwell legacy. Raymond Caldwell, the family patriarch, and his wife Lillian were frantically holding emergency meetings, desperately searching for a savior. Bankruptcy hung over them like a blade. But where others saw only ashes, Jade saw glowing embers. Groundbreaking marine biology patents ahead of their time. A brilliant R&D team buried under layers of incompetent leadership. And above all, the potential for revival if patient capital flowed in without manipulative strings attached. Jade acted swiftly, decisively, but in absolute silence. The inheritance became her seed money. Profits from clever freelance design projects were continuously poured in. She set up 6 shell companies each with overlapping ownership structures through offshore entities and discreet brokers. Shares were purchased, gradually stretched over months and years, precisely when Caldwell was at its weakest, its cheapest. Every time that empire teetered on collapse, an invisible hand steadied it. When it was all over, Jade owned 58% of the company. Absolute power. But no one knew who she was. To the Caldwell family, that mysterious investor was just a nameless entity, perhaps a hedge fund, perhaps a foreign conglomerate. They sighed in relief after each narrow escape, never suspecting that the person saving them was a young woman from North Park. 6 years ago, fate played a cruel joke no one could have foreseen. At a technology conference on ocean innovation in San Diego, Jade ran into Preston Caldwell by chance. He was the keynote speaker, talking about achievements that largely survived, thanks to Jade's silent capital. Their conversation started over a bland conference coffee. But within minutes, Preston was completely captivated. Her sharpness, subtle humor, and the way Jade challenged him openly. No flattery, no caution. When Preston mentioned the Caldwell name, expecting the usual look of awe, Jade simply nodded and steered the talk back to technology. That very indifference made his heart race. They dated. Quiet dinners, walks along the shore, late-night talks about dreams. Preston fell deeply in love for the first time. He was seen as a person, not the name on a business card. Jade loved him too. But that secret, it always weighed heavily. She said nothing, telling herself it was a test of authenticity. 1 year later, Preston proposed. The wedding reflected exactly who Jade was, small, warm, genuine. Despite pressure from Raymond and Lillian to showcase Caldwell power, Jade firmly chose a garden near North Park. Wildflowers, close friends, no extravagance. Preston stood by her, but the real challenge only began afterward. At the La Jolla mansion, judgmental stares enveloped them from the very first moment. Lillian smiled perfectly. Raymond grilled her about her background, compliments laced with condescension, comments about foundations, adaptation, status. That night on the drive home, Jade told me the truth, and I understood she hadn't hidden it out of scheming. She hid it because she wanted to be loved for real, because she refused to become mere jewelry for an empire. But that very disparity between her concealed power and their open contempt had planted the seeds for the coming storm. And when the truth finally comes out, no one in the Caldwell family will be left standing. Over the next 4 years, I watched my sister gradually shrink, not out of weakness, but because she was living in a marriage that had never truly belonged to her. The family gatherings at the La Jolla mansion became a fixed ritual, repeated like a carefully staged play. And occasionally Jade would invite me along without needing to say it. I still understood she needed a witness. Someone in her corner in a house where every glance carried judgment. I would drive up from my place to La Jolla, my old car looking tiny and out of place among their fleet of gleaming luxury vehicles, as if apologizing for its very existence. The mansion stood imposingly overlooking the ocean, beautiful in a cold, unforgiving way. The moment I stepped through the grand front door, I always felt like I and Jade had never truly been invited. The air there wasn't loud, but it was heavy, thick with evaluations that never needed to be spoken aloud. Lillian loved those dinners. She would glide through the rooms in designer dresses, skillfully ensuring every eye lingered on the new painting on the wall, the imported chandelier, or the freshly remodeled kitchen. Each detail was introduced with a proud voice as living proof of what she called the Caldwell legacy. She would talk about upcoming defense contracts, about the groundbreaking marine biology research division, as if Raymond had built it all from scratch with his own two hands. "We've had to fight so hard to keep the company in the family," she would often say, accompanied by a polite smile, then glance toward Jade just long enough for the hidden message to become crystal clear. "You don't belong in this world." Raymond was different. He didn't need that veneer of politeness. He sat at the head of the table, leaning back in his leather chair, sipping expensive scotch, and talking about the mysterious anonymous investor who had saved the company years ago. "Lucky for us," he would say with a half smile, "whoever it is has been smart enough to stay silent and let the Caldwell family continue running things. That's what real smart investing looks like." He said that without ever knowing or even imagining that the person keeping his empire alive was the very woman sitting across from him, quietly picking at her salad. At first the knives were small, almost invisible, but they were sharpened over time. One Christmas Preston unwrapped his gift, a gleaming watch so expensive I didn't dare guess the price. Jade opened her gift from Lillian, a plain scarf still bearing the clearance tag from a department store. "I thought something simple would suit your style," Lillian said quickly, her voice sweet to the point of indifference. Jade smiled and thanked her. But in the brief moment before she folded the scarf back up, I saw pain flash across her face like a crack in glass gone in an instant. At another dinner, Raymond casually suggested in front of everyone that Jade might want to consider staying home full-time. "Preston's career is taking off," he said as if it were obvious truth. "It would be better to have someone handling family matters instead of being distracted by those little freelance projects." Jade calmly replied that she loved her graphic design work. Lillian tilted her head, offering a well-rehearsed, sympathetic smile. "Of course, but it must be exhausting doing those small projects when you could be part of something much bigger." For the first 2 years, Preston still resisted. "Jade is really talented, Dad. Her clients highly value her work." Or he would simply change the subject whenever Lillian began comparing Jade unfavorably to the other wives' women who sat on charity boards and lunched at exclusive upper-crust clubs. But then, little by little, he changed. He stopped pushing back. He started nodding along. And eventually, he began adding his own comments that sounded eerily like his parents'. One evening remains etched deeply in my memory. We were standing on the terrace, the sunset painting the Pacific in brilliant orange. Lillian was recounting a gala where everyone had asked about Preston's future. Raymond emphasized how important it was to have a partner who understood their world. Preston turned to Jade and said in a calm voice that bordered on cruelty, "You should be grateful you get to be part of this family." The words hung in the air, heavy as a verdict. Jade didn't respond. She just stared out at the ocean. I wanted to say something, but she caught my eye and gave a slight shake of her head. On the drive home, she told me not to worry. She said she had her reasons. Jade never changed her lifestyle. She kept the small apartment in North Park, kept driving the same old Toyota, kept taking on graphic design projects she genuinely loved. She would come home after those La Jolla evenings, kick off her shoes, pour herself a glass of cheap wine, acting as if nothing out there could touch her. But I could see the toll it took. She mentioned Preston less and less. Her laughter grew rarer. When I asked if she was okay, she said yes, that it was all worth it to see the true nature of the people around her. I once asked why she didn't just tell them who she really was. Jade looked at me, her gaze steady and almost chilling in its resolve. She said she needed to be certain. Certain of what they truly valued. Certain of what Preston truly valued. She wanted no doubts whatsoever when that moment finally arrived. Those 4 years were like watching someone carry an invisible weight, one so heavy it could crush anyone else. Jade carried it alone, and I was the only one who knew that when the truth finally came out, the price the Caldwell family would pay would be far more than just money. One early fall Thursday evening, Preston walked into their North Park apartment and dropped the bomb as casually as if he were reminding her to pick up milk. He tossed his keys onto the kitchen counter, loosened his tie, and announced that his parents wanted the two of them over for dinner Saturday night at the La Jolla house. Just the 4 of them. No extended relatives, no friends. Private. He called it a family-only evening, then added almost as an afterthought that his dad had stressed it was pretty important, something about discussing the future. Jade was at the counter stirring coffee. The spoon froze mid-swirl. She turned slowly to face him. Something in Preston's tone set off every alarm in her head. Maybe it was the forced nonchalance. Maybe it was the way he avoided her eyes while reaching for a glass. Whatever it was, red flags exploded silently inside her. She asked him point blank if he knew what the conversation was really going to be about. Preston shrugged. He opened the fridge, grabbed a beer, and said it was probably good news. Maybe his dad wanted to hand him a bigger role at the company, or plan some extravagant family vacation. He flashed a grin, took a swig, and told her not to overthink it. Jade didn't buy a single word. That night, after Preston passed out on the sofa with the TV still blaring, Jade slipped out onto the tiny balcony and called me. Her voice was low, tight, the kind reserved for real emergencies. She told me about the invitation and said this one felt different. No holiday excuse, no relatives, no social buffer. Just the 4 of them behind closed doors. She said her gut was screaming that this wasn't a celebration. It wasn't good news. It felt like a showdown, a moment that had been building in the dark for years, finally clawing its way to the surface. I asked if she was sure she wanted to go. There was a long, heavy silence on the line. Then she said yes. She was tired of waiting for the final blow to land. If this was the night they decided to play their hand, she wanted to stare them down and hear every damn word. She insisted she'd be fine, but I could hear the wire-tight tension beneath her calm, a string pulled to the breaking point. I offered to come with her like old times. She shut it down fast. This time she needed to face it alone with only Preston by her side. Saturday arrived faster than either of them expected. That afternoon, Jade stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. Not to impress anyone, she'd be damned if she let them think she was trying to please them. She chose a simple black dress, clean lines, understated, powerful in its restraint. Minimal makeup. No extra jewelry beyond the pieces she always wore. Composed. In control. Preston, meanwhile, dressed like he was heading into a boardroom takeover, tailored suit, crisp tie shoes polished to a mirror shine. He looked every inch the Caldwell heir. They drove north in the BMW, last year's gift from his parents. The entire ride was silent. Jade watched the coastline slide by as the sun bled out, painting the sky in bruised oranges and deep purples. They pulled into the La Jolla estate just after 7. The mansion blazed against the darkening sky, perched on the cliff like a fortress, the endless Pacific crashing below. Every window glowed. In the driveway, only Raymond's Bentley and Lillian's white Range Rover. No staff cars, no lights in the guest house. Even the housekeeper had been given the night off. Lillian opened the door herself. She wore flowing silk pearls at her throat hair sculpted to perfection. The smile snapped into place, instantly polished, practiced, but it never reached her eyes. She embraced Preston, first long and warm, then turned to Jade for a quick, obligatory hug that felt more like a formality than affection. "So glad you both could make it," she said, her voice light but razor-sharp at the edges. Raymond was already waiting in the dining room, standing at the head of the table, red wine in hand. He gripped Preston's hand hard, clapped him on the shoulder, then gave Jade a curt nod. "Good to see you," he said, polite but ice-cold. The table was set for 4. Crystal glasses, heavy silver. An arrangement so formal it felt more like a high-stakes business negotiation than a family meal. Jade noticed. She noticed everything. Appetizers arrived and the small talk began. Raymond asked Preston about a project at work. Lillian commented on how pleasant the fall weather had been. Jade answered when spoken to, short, neutral, unflinching. Preston tried to keep the mood light, rattling off business numbers, upcoming contracts, working overtime to fill the silence. But underneath, the tension coiled tighter and tighter. Later, Jade told me she caught every tell. The quick glances Raymond and Lillian exchanged across the table. The way Lillian's fingers tapped rhythmically against her wine glass. Raymond checking his watch once, then again. The conversation circled harmless topics, but no one was really listening. Everything felt delayed, staged. By the time the main course plates were cleared, the air in the dining room had thickened to the point of suffocation. Jade sat ramrod, straight, hands folded calmly in her lap. She wasn't anxious anymore. She was ready, waiting for the moment they finally crossed the line. She knew it was coming. They all knew. And whatever words were spoken next would shatter everything. When the main course plates were cleared away, the final remnants of polite conversation vanished with them. The clinking of porcelain faded into nothing, replaced by a silence so heavy, so oppressive, it bore down on everyone at the table like an invisible weight. Raymond broke it first, and he did so deliberately with chilling precision. He rose from his chair without a word, walked to the sideboard against the wall, and picked up a slim black leather folder. He wasn't hurried. Every step was measured, every gesture calculated, like a man who had rehearsed this exact scene hundreds of times in his mind. When he returned, he placed the folder dead center on the table, aligning its edges perfectly with the polished wood, as if that flawless precision itself was a silent warning. Then he sat back down, his cold gaze sweeping across the table. Raymond leaned slightly forward, clasping his hands tightly together on the surface. When he spoke, his voice was low, steady, and ice-cold, the same voice that had made countless opponents tremble in boardrooms when billions were at stake. "Preston," he began, "your mother and I have spent a great deal of time thinking about your future, about the path you're on, about what is truly best for you and for this family." Jade felt the shift immediately. The air seemed to constrict around her throat, but she kept her back straight, her shoulders motionless, her face an unreadable mask. Raymond continued, each word dropping like hammer blows. "This isn't about creating unnecessary drama. Quite the opposite. We're here tonight because we believe problems must be addressed head-on before they become wounds that can never heal." Lillian picked up seamlessly, her voice softer, warmer on the surface, but laced underneath with a razor-sharp edge like silk wrapped around a dagger. "We've watched your marriage very closely over the past 4 years," she said, her eyes now locked on Jade like a poisoned arrow. "And in the end, we've reached a conclusion. An extremely difficult one." She paused for exactly 1 beat, just long enough for those words to sink deep into the skin. "Jade, you simply bring no real value to Preston's life." The statement landed without mercy, brutal and precise, like a bullet straight to the heart. "No meaningful connections," Lillian went on, her tone flat, as if reading from a verdict. No social influence, no strategic advantage, nothing that contributes to the legacy Raymond and I have spent our entire lives building. She tilted her head, slightly feigning sympathy. This marriage has become a burden. It's holding our son back, preventing him from accessing the opportunities, the relationships, the alliances that could elevate him to the position he was born to occupy. Raymond nodded once slowly, as if driving a nail into the point. Never breaking eye contact with Jade for even a second, he opened the leather folder. Inside were pristine white sheets, perfectly organized, clearly legal documents, and resting on top, gleaming under the chandelier light, a check. $2 million. Raymond slid the entire stack across the table toward Jade. The sound of paper gliding over wood echoed deafeningly in the deathly quiet room. Our offer is very simple, he said, his voice like ice. You sign the no-fault divorce papers, you take this money, and you disappear from our son's life. Lillian added her tone, sweet but cutting. No courts, no scandals, no tabloid headlines, just a clean, dignified exit for all of us. Raymond leaned back, his gaze dripping with contempt. $2 million is extraordinarily generous, more than most people ever dream of seeing in a lifetime. Certainly, far more than someone like a freelance designer could ever earn on her own. He let those words hang, seeping in before delivering the killing blow. This money will set you up comfortably. You'll be free to pursue whatever dreams you want, without continuing to drag Preston into the abyss with you. Silence engulfed the room, thick and suffocating. Far below the cliff, the Pacific waves still crashed against the rocks, steady and relentless like a clock, ticking down fate. Jade looked down at the check, then at the stack of papers, then up, locking eyes with Raymond. Her face betrayed nothing. No tremor, no anger, no pain. Preston had still not spoken a word. He sat frozen like a statue, shoulders rigid, eyes glued to the table as if begging the polished wood to swallow him whole. When the silence became unbearable, he finally lifted his head. He looked at his father, at his mother, then at Jade. There was no explosion, no furious defense, no outraged stand from a husband protecting his wife. Only hesitation, inner conflict, and finally, surrender. He cleared his throat. His voice was small, weak, almost pleading. Maybe you should think about it carefully, he said to Jade, unable to meet her eyes. Really carefully. This might actually be the best thing for both of us. In the long run. That was the moment everything truly shattered. Not when the $2 million check appeared. Not when his parents publicly declared her a burden, but when the man sitting beside her, the man who had once knelt to propose, who had vowed to stand by her forever, gently suggested that selling out their marriage might be the best solution for her. Jade felt it like a cold blade plunging slowly into her heart, twisting deeper deliberately. She didn't react immediately. She let the silence return thicker and colder than ever. Her breathing remained even. Her hands stayed still. Then she lifted her head, staring straight into Raymond's eyes, her own gaze now sharp and cold as tempered steel. When she spoke, her voice was calm to the point of terrifying, almost polite. I truly appreciate everyone's directness, she said, each word clear and cutting. However, before I sign anything, I'll need my attorney to review these documents thoroughly. There are a few important details that need clarification. Raymond blinked, just once. Then he laughed, a short, mocking bark filled with disdain. Your attorney, he repeated, his voice rising in incredulous scorn. And what kind of attorney do you think a freelance graphic designer like you could possibly afford for something like this? The words dripped with contempt, wrapped in perfectly feigned concern. Lillian's lips pressed into a thin, tight line, a flash of alarm in her eyes. Preston squirmed in his seat, face flushed, but remained silent. He didn't defend her, didn't challenge his parents' assumption. He just sat there watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Jade didn't flinch. She calmly reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, and placed it gently on the table in front of her, the soft click echoing like a starting gun. "I can make the call right now," she said, her voice steady, icy if no one minds. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet 10 degrees. Raymond's smirk froze on his face. Lillian shot a quick glance at her husband, the first visible crack unmistakable and undeniable in their flawless armor of confidence. Jade unlocked her phone slowly, deliberately, never breaking eye contact with Raymond. Her hands didn't shake, her voice didn't rise. But in that moment, the balance of power in this dining room had quietly shifted. They still thought they held all the cards. They still believed that $2 million check had ended the conversation. They had no idea this was only the beginning. And once the wheel started turning, there would be no stopping it. 25 minutes later, the heavy oak door of the Caldwell mansion opened, and Marcus Vaughn stepped inside carrying a sleek briefcase. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, and moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had done this many times before. Jade had worked with him for 8 years. He knew every detail of her holdings, every layer of protection she had built. She nodded once as he entered the dining room. He placed the briefcase on the table next to the untouched dissolution papers and opened it without a word. Marcus addressed the room directly, voice clear and professional. He introduced himself as Jade Brooks's personal counsel and stated that he was there to provide full transparency on a matter directly affecting Caldwell Enterprises. Then he began laying out documents one by one. He explained the current ownership structure in precise terms. Jade Brooks controlled 58% of voting shares through 6 privately held subsidiary entities established over the past 8 years. Those entities had been the primary source of capital during every critical juncture. Every major defense contract secured in the last decade, every marine biology initiative that pulled the company from near collapse, had been made possible by injections of funds traceable only to those subsidiaries. Marcus projected calm numbers on a tablet he pulled from the case, capital infusions totaling billion stock purchases during the darkest financial periods, strategic loans that kept creditors at bay. All anonymous on paper. All originating from Jade. Raymond's face drained of color as the figures appeared. He gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white, trying to interrupt at first. "This is absurd," he muttered, but his voice cracked. Marcus continued without pause, citing dates, amounts, board minutes, where the anonymous investor was thanked for saving the company. Lillian stared at the tablet, mouth slightly open, words failing her. She reached for her water glass, missed it, and knocked it over. The spill spread across the white tablecloth, but no one moved to clean it. Preston shook his head slowly, eyes wide, repeating "no" under his breath, as if denying it could make it untrue. He looked from Marcus to Jade, searching for some sign this was a bluff. There was none. Marcus finished with the valuation slide at current market price. Jade's position was worth well over $10 billion. She was without question the majority shareholder. The room fell into a stunned hush. Then Jade spoke for the first time since Marcus arrived. Her voice was steady, colder than anyone in that room had ever heard it. She told them everything. She had acquired the shares long before she met Preston. She had watched the company teeter on bankruptcy and decided it was a solid bet if properly capitalized. She never planned to reveal herself. Meeting Preston changed nothing about the investment. Marrying him changed nothing about the ownership. She had stayed silent all these years for one reason: to see who they really were when they believed they held all the power. She wanted to know if Preston loved her for herself, not for access to the Caldwell name. She wanted to know if his parents would ever accept someone without wealth or status. Tonight they had answered that question completely. She looked directly at Raymond. She said she had already sent formal notice to the board of directors earlier that evening, requesting an emergency meeting Monday morning. The single agenda item a vote on the continued tenure of Raymond Caldwell as chairman. With her voting bloc plus the proxies she had quietly secured from smaller shareholders over the years, the outcome was certain. Raymond finally found his voice. It came out hoarse, desperate. He demanded to know how this could be legal, how no one had ever traced it back. Marcus answered calmly. Everything was structured through legitimate holding companies, fully compliant with SEC regulations. There had never been a requirement to disclose beneficial ownership below certain thresholds, and Jade had stayed carefully beneath them until now. Lillian tried to speak, tears starting in her eyes, but nothing coherent came out. Preston pushed back from the table chair, scraping loudly, face twisted in shock and something close to fear. He stared at Jade like he was seeing a stranger. Jade stood up slowly. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The power in the room had shifted irrevocably, and everyone felt it. She told them the vote would happen. Raymond would be removed. A professional interim team would take over until a permanent structure was in place. She would no longer remain silent. Marcus closed the briefcase with a soft click. Jade thanked him quietly. Together they walked toward the door, leaving the Caldwell family frozen in the wreckage of their certainty. The drive back down the coast to North Park that night was completely silent. Preston didn't say a single word. Monday morning arrived fast. The emergency board meeting took place at the downtown San Diego headquarters. Jade didn't attend in person. She voted by proxy through her holding entities. The result came quickly. Raymond Caldwell was removed as chairman effective immediately. A professional interim management team hired from outside stepped in to run day-to-day operations. No appeals, no second chances. The vote was overwhelming. 2 months later, Jade filed for divorce in San Diego Superior Court. The paperwork was straightforward. Every share, every dollar of value tied to Caldwell Enterprises had been acquired long before the marriage. The layered holding companies provided ironclad separation of assets under California law. She walked away with full control and didn't lose a cent. Preston's name stayed off the major holdings. The old family trust provisions that once guaranteed him a large inheritance were rewritten years earlier to tie directly to active leadership roles. With Raymond gone from the chair, those triggers no longer applied. Preston's financial future shrank dramatically overnight. The social fallout hit the Caldwells hard and fast. Invitations to the exclusive charity galas in La Jolla stopped coming. Seats at the country club events they used to host went to newer faces. Old friends suddenly had scheduling conflicts whenever Lillian tried to arrange lunches or tennis dates. Whispers spread through their circles about the scandal, about how the family had lost control of their own company to the quiet daughter-in-law no one had taken seriously. Raymond and Lillian retreated further into the big house on the cliff. Staff turnover increased. Rooms that once hosted large parties stayed dark most evenings. The Bentley gathered dust in the garage more often than not. Preston moved out of the guest cottage on the estate within weeks. He rented a small condo downtown and started looking for work that didn't carry the Caldwell name. Opportunities that once fell into his lap now required interviews, references, and competition. He took an entry-level position at a smaller firm far from the executive track he had always assumed was his birthright. Jade, meanwhile, guided Caldwell Enterprises into its strongest growth phase yet. The new management team focused on innovation, securing larger defense contracts, and expanding the marine biology division into cutting-edge ocean conservation tech. Stock value climbed steadily. She stayed hands-off on daily decisions, but kept final say on direction. She also launched a foundation with a clear mission: seed funding and mentorship for women launching startups in defense technology and marine science. The first grants went out within 6 months, supporting founders who, like her years earlier, had big ideas but limited resources. The work gave her purpose beyond the numbers. I saw the change in my sister up close. She still lived in the same North Park apartment, still drove the old Toyota, Still took on occasional graphic design gigs because she enjoyed the creativity, but the weight was gone from her shoulders. She carried herself taller, spoke with quiet certainty, made decisions without second-guessing how they would be received by anyone else. She didn't flaunt the power. She simply used it. We'd meet for coffee on weekends, sit outside some local spot, and talk, like we did before everything exploded. She never expressed regret about the years of silence. She said it showed her exactly who people were when the masks were off, and it freed her to build something real on her own terms. Money and status can open doors, but they can't buy genuine loyalty or respect. When trust is traded away for ambition or appearances, it rarely comes back. Jade proved that character reveals itself clearest when no one thinks you're watching. And once the truth comes out, some bridges burn forever.